All right, so welcome back. This is part 2 with Candy. Thank you again for coming back and sharing your amazing time, energy, and all the wisdom bombs that you've been sharing. Just so everyone knows, we were just talking and I had to time out her and be like, we have to start recording because Candy has this incredible idea for pretty much everybody on the planet, as I see it. But since we're talking about being a yoga teacher, someone who interacts with people, and oftentimes we have to walk our talk, and sometimes we're just not having one of those days where we're in the place of necessarily feeling maybe as great or on top of the world. So what did you share with me just now that I just blew my mind? I said, yes, we all need
It's an exercise for filling up your own cup. And so I use it as a resource. What I like to do when I'm having like really, really good days and I'm feeling really special, maybe even when you're feeling cute, whenever you're just feeling on top of it, I get out my phone and I record myself and have like little pep talks with myself and words of encouragement. Whatever I think I'm doing, I'm on top of it. If I'm loving myself, I express that to myself. And so whenever I'm having days that aren't so great or don't feel so good, or I just need that little extra battery pack, as I like to call it, I'll have those recordings to go through and to help me to get back on the other side of doing what I know I need to do, where I want to be, and just giving you that extra dose of serotonin and energy and that positivity. It's really great. And it's been really good for me. I can honestly say it. So I think there's no harm in trying. Give it a go. Give yourself that recording and see how it goes.
Yeah, I love that, because then it's your own pep talk, right? We're not reaching out for someone to validate us or for someone to like give us a boost, right? Like we know, like you said, this is what we were starting. Like we have everything inside of us. You and
Every
I,
single thing.
we get that. We like fundamentally know it, and we have moments in our lives. We've been very lucky to have moments in our lives where we actually have experienced and felt that. And that's why we're so passionate about sharing what we share with other people, is because we know that this is not just our own, right? Like this is accessible and available to everyone. So use some of the technology that we have to give ourselves our own pep talks.
Yeah.
That's so empowering. That's great. That's such a beautiful, thank you.
No problem.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be talking. So this is part of our part 2, right? Like
Yes.
we had a great conversation about the ins and outs of working with private clients. And as soon as we hung up, we were already texting with each other, being like, whoops, let's keep this conversation going. Let's talk about more of the pieces that we didn't get in the last interview. So let's pick up where we left off. I think one of the main questions right off the bat was what happens if someone can't make it or they're rescheduling, right? Like if someone has to cancel, what does that process look like? Because you're very busy, and some people have more space in their day and their week, but what does that process look like? And what have you learned along the way about rescheduling people?
So what I like to do for myself is I have a 24-hour cancellation policy that they're signing when we do the intake form. There's some fun agreements that we're making, some commitments that we're making to ourselves. And I talk about them as we're going through the paperwork, and it just to notify them that if they ever have any problem, anything that's foreseeable, we have a 24-hour cancellation policy, and you can reschedule it for that within that same week if the time that we can agree on is available. And I've had people who have to cancel afterwards, but it's already understood. Like for me, like I said, I take payments ahead of time. So more than likely it's already covered. And if they're able to reschedule, then it works out fine. No harm, no foul. But they've already agreed to it if we have to make that cancellation. And it just allows us to be held accountable. So if we, even things like a cold, all right, I might be getting a little sniffly, I might be getting a little sneezy. Let me go ahead and make that contact so I can already have in place what might be best for me or what I might need to do. And I think that goes into some of the other question that you have for me, which was, how much are we taking off of the mat? What lifestyle advice are we given? How much, are we giving to them outside of our asana practice? how much of yourself are you kind of making available is how I see it. And so that's something that you walk a very fine line on, and you become very aware of the person that you're involved with. I like, again, going back to those intuitive skills, seeing what communication style that they have, making yourself available to them if they need extra resources. But with that, I think it's very important to, again, go back to those boundaries. So for me, I have a Google Voice number, which is a separate phone number that I can cut on and cut off as I see fit. If you want to have another phone that you can put away and cut off at a certain hour, you can do that as well. But I don't mind, for myself, I don't mind being available to my clients if they have questions about recommendations for books, or, if they want to try a new fitness class or things that are going on with their day, because I think it makes our time on the mat more productive. And it makes it overall, knowing what they have going on in their life, I know how to be able to tailor our time together.
Yeah, that's beautiful. So, so you get all of that done in the hour, in like some of the additional aspects, or is that done via email and text, or do you try to get it all in that one session?
So we have maybe about like a few minutes as we're coming in to greet each other in the same space and come to the mat. So that's some time for conversation, but I'm not opposed to a few quick conversation texts, throughout the day, throughout the week, whatever the case may be. It's not anything that's but I feel bombarded with, but it allows me to feel like I'm in touch with my clients and knowing what their needs are. So I think it just helps me to be more progressive in my work.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I think that's very helpful, especially for someone who might be thinking, if they're newer as a teacher, right? Oh my gosh, I can easily teach a 45-minute class, or what are the boundaries? I think part of the question too, and I've had other conversations with other teachers in other kind of interview like this, Zoom chats, really about, like, you need to know your boundary. This is really a conversation about boundaries as well, and not like staying within your scope of practice too, knowing like if you have other certificates that you can pull from, you can kind of package that in, but also knowing your state and local regulations about how far reaching can you go? Where is that scope of practice? Where is that boundary? And then also personally, what is that boundary? So
that boundary. Yeah. I definitely, if someone is giving me an ailment in their body, if they're having like neck soreness, or, hey, I want to work on my lower back, or maybe we can abstain from working on my lower back. If I know of any practices that we can include in our asana to address it, then I will include those. If they are continuing, and it's something that I always give them autonomy. So I don't know what your body is saying. I can't hear what's going on inside of there. So it's very important for you to listen to your body and make those adjustments that you may see fit. And if you're feeling like, all right, this isn't working, then always, go see a physician, go see your care provider, your doctor. I am here as an assist. I am not the aid. I am not the answer. I'm none of those things. And I let that be known, because it is not in my scope of practice. My scope of practice is yoga.
Yeah. And people are pretty understanding. This is my experience, but I want to know, because you work in a different part of the country too. When people, because inevitably once you build rapport, they're going to want you to have all the answers. Like they start to trust you in that way. And so it's like, oh, I have this and that. So has that conversation always been very easy for you, working one-on-one with people, in terms of, what do you say? Like, oh, this is out of my scope of practice, I'd love to refer you to someone? Or what is kind of your conversation you have with someone when they're moving into that realm that kind of moves out of your comfort level and your experience?
I often suggest physical therapy. I ask them, what type of healthcare do they have outside of our time together? Are they going to the doctor? Are they getting other physical exercise or treatments? Do they go get massages? Are they getting stretch therapy? Like, there are so many different modalities that you can explore. Acupuncture, like there's so many different ways to be able to look into things. And so if it's not in someone's practice already, then, like informing them about, some options that might be available, but letting them know they're just options, not the answer. Again, you're walking into this at your own risk, but, please be informed, please look into it. And if you want suggestions, I can also provide those for, references that I have, but making sure that they're walking into it and doing what they feel is best for them on their own. But just, being an ally and being a support system, that's what I like to do. So even if, you have to take a few days off, I've made a suggestion. If maybe your neck is a little bit sore, all right, we have some exercises we can do there. They're still sore after that. They might have gone to see physical therapy. They might have gone in to check in with their doctor. I like to just make a little note and follow up with them afterwards, even, if it's outside of our time on the mat, to see how they're doing. Did you go ahead and have that follow up? Did you have that check-in? Are you feeling a little bit better? Just to, because I do care, and you are building a relationship with these people, but also to letting them know that their health is vital and important to you, and you're not always going to be the answer.
Yeah, thank you. I have to just say, my dog somehow pushed open the door and is now snoring so loud behind me. So if you hear that, it's not coming from me. I have a dog right back here going.
You're making some interesting sounds.
Yeah, no, I have a dog here. Part of me wants to try to shoo her out, but
no, I can't hear anything, honestly.
Okay, great. Yeah. So how do you also handle, or have you had to, or do you know people who have handled injuries, right? So some people, let's say, hurt themselves, gardening on Sunday, or, something doesn't feel right and you're working with them on Monday. They don't tell you until you've shown up, just kind of like a class too. You can show up to a class and the same thing. So in a private, how would you manage that? Or what conversation does it look like? Do you reschedule right then? Do you work with what's there? How does that, what does that look like?
I think first and foremost, I always want to check in to see how they're feeling. And then checking their mobility. So if they feel like this is something that's going to distract them from their practice, then maybe we might want to be able to, we might want to reschedule. But normally people are very clear in that. And then also too, having that rapport with your client. So, hey, if you're on your way somewhere, checking and confirming, is everything okay? And then there's a room and opportunity for them to say, I had this injury today, or I had this injury, yesterday, and I just wanted you to know. But creating that space for the conversation to be had. So then when you see them in person, you can kind of mitigate it. But just like you were saying, when you have a class, a public class, you got to be able to think on the fly. And so you got to be able to pull out those things from your toy kit. I used to call it a tool kit, but I was in the Justice Reform, the Social Justice Summit on Sunday. It was so good. So good. And now it's a toy box of what.
Same. I totally wrote that down too. I loved it.
We have to talk about that soon, Resma. But being able to have things that you can go to that maybe aren't so high endurance or high impact, something that's a little bit more minimal, so that they feel like they're still getting something out of the practice, but that it's not, activating any nerves or anything that might be painful. We don't want to further any pain that they're having.
Yeah, that's great. So when you started working with private clients, this is a more technical question. I'm just trying to think of all the different, all the questions that someone might ask did you check your liability insurance to make sure it covered privates?
Yes, that was a first and foremost necessity, because you don't want to get in any trouble on that end for things that might be out of your control, or things that people might try to roll over or kind of ignore, or just not mention for whatever reason that people have. And sometimes people might be embarrassed, they might have. Body might have been up to something, and then they find out, maybe had a long night, who knows where this could go. And you don't want to have to have a confrontational conversation if they are not prepared for it. But at the same time, you need to be prepared if they don't want to have that conversation. You need to have some backup in place for yourself at the end of the day.
Yeah,
Mhm.
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
And we never anticipate an injury. Like we're never, how do I put this? It's even in a group class, you never are like, you're there out of wanting to do good and have an experience of wholeness or moving inward. At least I am. I'm not going to place that on you, but from what we've talked about, that's important to you too. And then things happen, right? Like it can be an emotional thing that comes up that the person wasn't even aware of in their life, or something they thought they had kind of already moved through, but here it is resurfacing. And so there's always going to be, how do I put it? I have definitely dealt with this, and I'm wondering if you had too, where the person almost blames you for kind of, well, you didn't tell me this was going to happen, or you didn't tell me that this was a part of yoga, or that this could happen again, and wanting, almost in many ways to like blame you.
Mhm.
And yeah, and things happen. So
Yeah.
in your own like professional experience, have you had to manage that? What did it look like? um what
I
advice would you
think,
give to others who,
yeah.
who haven't had that, but eventually you teach long enough and it will?
Yeah. I have a personal story I can reference here. It was when I like first started out teaching, and I had booked with a client. Um, and unbeknownst to me, they were going through some emotional battles. And during the class, I couldn't get any sort of emotion. I was like, man, I'm like stinking today. And it was in the beginning of my journey. So for some reason I was taking it personal, because like, all right, this doesn't seem pleasurable. Like, all right, you gotta think of something else. You gotta think of something more. And afterwards, I had learned that recently she had a passing. Her father had passed, and she had booked a session just because she didn't know what else to do. She'd heard that this was how, like this was going to help resolve. And so what I saw during class was a build up of trying to restrain emotion. And after class, she just like, it was a absolute waterfall. And of course, wanting to maintain some sort of humanality, as well as some sort of professionalism, we took some time, and I just sat and listened as much as I could. And so that was for me. I was like, okay, all right, these things can happen, these things will happen. All right, let me put some things into place, talking about those lessons that we learned, and then having the beautiful experience of being trauma informed from Indra with our 300. I was able to tailor the language that I use with people. So always letting people know that this is their own personal experience, that they have agency, that they are going to experience different things at different times throughout their journey with their own body, with their own emotions, and that is natural. And I think just creating a space for it, so when they do experience, they do have it, it doesn't feel like a space where they're revolting. It doesn't feel like a space where they feel ashamed. They feel open to have that experience because it's natural. Even something as, what some way laugh at is like gas, right? They have like flatulence, right? It's for some people that is mortifying for them, but just, reaffirming that that's a natural part of this process that we're in, on this journey. You're gonna have these things happen. And it's not uncommon. And so I think really just being honest to that front, I think gives space and permission for people to interact with those feelings and let them kind of like come out however they do. But yeah, definitely a learning experience, something, I had to see and adapt from it. And you might not always get it right. I think if you're being earnest and true to heart, and allowing people to experience how they feel, whether it is that they they might, they might not ever book with you again, or whatever the case may be. Not taking that personal, not feeling like it was something, you did maliciously or against them, or that they did it against you. I think when we were closing out our last time, of thinking like we're all just trying to survive. We're all just trying to be our best and do what we think, is right, as well as like protecting ourselves naturally. And so that may have been, the experience that you two were to have, or, you and that client. And maybe that, they go on and they go forth and they have another experience or another journey, or maybe you were a lesson for them, but not taking it to heart. That's what I try to do.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's really, because a lot of us in this field, when I say field, meaning like any body mind practice, is we're givers by nature. Many of us are givers.
Yeah.
We want to be reducing the suffering in the world somehow,
Yeah.
and
empaths too, right? We're usually empaths. So we're usually receiving all of it, and we're usually like soaking it up. Like, you're crying. All right, I'm crying. Like, all right, I have those same tears. I feel that pain. Like, and you have to, figure out how to, minimize it a little bit, or maybe not to pick it all up, because that will weigh you down.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And it just really, one of the things that you said that I wish I had heard this more as a child, right? Not even just at the yoga studio, but just as a child, is to normalize our emotions, and to normalize the idea that it was okay to be angry or sad or all of it, instead of the messages that we sometimes received, and there's so many reasons why, like the family, the history, the culture, the magazines you grow up with, the community you grow up, like there's just so many, you can't put one finger on it, but that messaging sometimes that we get and we think is the right way, sometimes makes it feel unnormal then to even acknowledge that that your tears are actually a normal process. There's something not wrong with me, or you're weak, or you're broken, all these other things we might internalize from a variety of sources. So I thank you for sharing that, because I think it is really important. And one of the things that I think a lot of people aren't aware of when they enter into somatic practices, right? Embodied practices, like, oh man, right? We say this all the thought that the issues are in the tissues, like that's something, if you've been practicing long enough, any movement modality, you begin to understand that and embody that, and understand that that's not just a saying, that that's a truth. But for someone new coming into it, right, like, oh, I didn't know that tears was part of it, or my anger, or XYZ. So yeah, I know that that's one of those things too, that depending on what other experiences you've had in your life to hold space for others to do that, if you haven't had a lot of that and you come into being a yoga teacher and working with bodies in this way, you have to like learn it real quick sometimes.
You're learning it on the fly.
Yeah, and then you go to training because you realize, oh my gosh, like, whoa, I didn't realize this was part of holding space for others. I need more tools and laying other things. So yeah, I mean, the learning never ends. Like we were saying before we even hit recorded, like we're like forever learners in this whole process, just diving into this field, whether you're a guide in it or whether you yourself are the forever learner, like it just never ends, right? Like this human experience is just so deep and rich, and it's a never ending process. And that's what's so exciting about it too. And then as a practitioner, to be kind on yourself too, right? Like to have, again, this comes back to before we were recording, is like that, that space for you too, that it's okay that you don't know it all, right? Like it's no one's ever expected to know it all. And yet for ourselves, sometimes we hold that towards ourselves. Like, how did I not know this? Or I could have done so much better, or I'm not doing enough, or all those different, really the vrittis that the sutras.
Very, very much so. how I reason my human experience is I am here to learn. So with that in mind, I think it makes things a lot easier. And it takes some of the pressure off that we give ourselves, or I say for me, it takes some of that pressure off, that as long as I'm learning, this is an experience that I'm supposed to have. This is okay. I'm allowed to learn, Oh, that didn't work out. Oh, I thought this was going to happen, but this happened. Okay, we're still learning. This is okay. We're not giving up. We're pushing forward. We are still, receiving information, and now we can make that adjustment and continue on, and spread the knowledge that we've learned ourselves, and keep learning and applying it. Yeah.
Yeah, that I don't know principle of being a teacher I remember that being one of the most liberating days of my life as a teacher, guide, educator, whatever name I was going with, of realizing like the first time I really just was like, really owned it. I was like, I don't know. And I was okay with that, rather than like, I don't know. Oh my God, who are they going to think like all the other stuff, just like so liberating to be like, I don't know. And I'm really okay not knowing. I am not going to go learn more, but to also give yourself that freedom as wherever you are in your life, you're not ever going to know it all, right? Like, that's so unrealistic. And at the same times, many people hold that to themselves.
It's something that I think was definitely taught to me. Even thinking about age, like, okay, at this age, I have to do this. At this age, I have to do that because it looks a certain way. These are the rules. This is the checklist. And I said, but no, I'm me, my own person, in my own car, driving, having my own human experience. And it might not necessarily look like yours, but it's not supposed to, because that's why I'm here. My experience can't be your experience. That's why I'm here. And realizing that is perfectly fine. Because I did used to give myself that pressure of it needs to look a certain way, or you've reached this age. That's the one that honestly got me, because it was just for so long it was taught to me of like, by this age. 30 was that age for me. So it's funny like having this conversation now, but like 30 looked like this. 30 was, having a house and a family and, all these things in place. And now I'm 30 and I couldn't be any happier with myself. And I don't have any of those things, but I am having my very own experience, and I'm liberated in that. Liberated in living in my truth, and listening to what I know internally. That's why I think it's so important, and why yoga is so much more than just the asana practice. It's so many different things like that really helps me function throughout like my life. And I'm so thankful that I was even ever introduced to yoga, honestly. And that I'm on this path. But it was having that understanding and having that wherewithal to know that this is okay, and that I'll be all right, because no matter what it is that I might have sought out for myself, or I think going back to what you were saying of like, this idea of like perfection, or, pushing it to reach a certain level of greatness, I think we get down on ourselves, but really it's for whatever reason, somehow we have this like vision of what the future looks like, but we don't have that. Like, that's not a tool that we have. And so we think like, oh, this is not where I'm supposed to be at this moment in time. But it's like, you are actually here because this is where you are supposed to be. You can't be anywhere else than where you are supposed to be. And I get off on a tangent all the time, but
Oh, I love it. Cause I mean, these are the teachings, right? Like this is the heart of yoga, that like, triangle is one teeny tiny sliver of a tool. But this, like these conversations we're having, this is at the heart. This is what you and I know this, but like, and why we're always encouraging, why I encourage everyone. It's like, you can't read every time I pick up the sutras. It's a whole new book. I mean, I have one version, right? Like I've read it, I don't know how many times now. And every time I pick it up, it's a new book.
Every single time.
And nowhere, it's not talking about
part of your life.
And it's not talking about Surya Namaskar, and it's not, and it's like the heart and the it really is like, for me, the compass, like my compass of how to show up in my I was listening to Accessible Yoga podcast earlier today, and I didn't realize I was listening to the first one. I just download them randomly, and it happened to be their very, very first one, which I thought was hilarious because I've listened to so many of them. But she was like, Carnes she's just hilarious. She's like, like, I'm just so curious what's going on in my meat suit, and I just busted up laughing because that's exactly how I felt. It was like, these books, these ancient teachings help me understand, like, what's going on in this meat suit, there's so much going on, and I don't even know if I like it or not, but I'm stuck in it. So all of a sudden it was a path that allowed me to bring some relationship and some questioning and svadhyaya that allows me, I never planned. I like pinch myself and like humbly bow to this. How did this happen? Like, I never intended to guide and facilitate yoga. Like, I was gonna be a hand surgeon. Like, where did that come from?
Yeah.
But I couldn't be happier. Like you said, like, my life looks nothing like I had dreamt it as a 5-year-old, 20-year-old, 18-year-old, whatever, all those things you had to do in school. Like, none of it. And I couldn't be happier because it gives me a never-ending field of understanding life and humanity and our relationship to each other, but one that's through connection, not like you're over there and I'm over here and we kind of have some similarities. Like, really, the heart of it is like, we are each so uniquely ourselves, and at the same time, there's so much that connects us. Like, so much.
Yeah. I'll tell you a funny story. I'm not sure if I've ever shared it with you. When I was younger, I wanted to be a cardiologist. I wanted to be a heart surgeon because I wanted to fix broken hearts.
Tears. Oh, I'm gonna cry.
I was young. I didn't understand. I didn't understand conceptually how that would happen, but that's why I wanted to do it. And, I'm not that cardiologist. I'm not, a heart surgeon, but in a way, I do feel like I get to connect people, to those broken spaces that they have and help them to find their own way to heal their own hearts. And so, in a way, in a roundabout way, I'm like, oh, this is where I am supposed to be. Like, this is my purpose. And maybe I didn't identify it exactly how it was then, but I knew innately, my heart knew where it was supposed to be and what I was supposed to be doing. And so it feels so good to be able to share that.
I'm really trying hard not to just bawl right now, because it's just our younger selves, right? Before we get really, really touched by the world around us, it's like, we know our dharma. You know your dharma. You're doing it. You are living that still. It doesn't look like cutting bodies open and like suturing, but look, sutures, the threads, the yoga sutras, like mending people's hearts. Like, you are doing that. That is so beautiful. That's like mind-blowing perfection. Hearing you say that, it's just like, oh. And it's such a reflection. I've always been curious, like, why was I so fascinated with like hand surgery, right? Like something, but again, like touching people's lives. Like, that's to me, there's like this connection, like we feel, and the way that we experience the world through our hands. And it hurt me to think that there would be people who wouldn't have that ability, and that being a hand surgeon, I would be able to help them stay connected. And so then when I reflect, I'm like, oh yeah, I guess I'm still like, that thread in my life is still moving through me, that it's like.
But you didn't know because you didn't know. So they were evolving. You're always learning. And as you learned and you applied it, we came here and you're like, oh, this is the same.
It is. And maybe in a more divinely guided way that allows us to have conversations that we wouldn't have had if you were that cardiologist or I was that hand surgeon, is that the conversations we have with people look very different. And yet that same thread of why we want to spend so much time doing what we're doing.
Yeah.
Still there, right? Like, oh God, thank you for sharing that. Like, that is just, I mean, talk about, like how these conversations go into spiral. Like this is a whole nother conversation about what we can bring in Dharma. A
Yeah.
lot of people think Dharma is about what we do, right?
Mhm.
Like from 8 to 5, what we're doing and how that,
Yeah.
but I've always understand Dharma as a different way of like, of this thread that you and I are both sharing and
Mhm.
talking about right now. It's almost like this part of you that knew why you were coming onto this planet. And it
Mhm.
honestly, it doesn't matter if you had decided to become a baker or if I had
Yeah.
decided to go clean toilets,
Yeah.
like somehow
Mhm.
that same thread would come
Mhm.
through in those spaces.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I just,
It's it is mind blowing how it all comes around, how it all blends together. And so when people are like, "Good things happen," just offhand, I'm like, no, everything happens for a reason. All of our thoughts, all of our beliefs, it happens for a reason. It helps to thread us. It helps to form, who we are in present day. And I just think it's so beautiful to be able to have these conversations and to be able to share in this energy. Thank you so much.
oh my gosh. No.
Mhm. Thank you.
Are there any other questions that about working with private clients that we didn't? I mean, I know we can talk forever about all topics, but
Yeah.
specific, like thinking of a new teacher or someone or a teacher who's wanting to branch out and maybe move away from the group and do more individual. Is it like, have we covered it, do you think, at this point?
I think we've pretty much gotten around to it. Even if we've gotten around it, around the bend. If you want to get it done, have your intention set on it, and go after it. Keep having the conversations. Keep learning. Always be learning. And if that is where you are supposed to be, if that is your next step, then it will naturally happen. One of my favorite books is The Alchemist. I'll say that 1,000 times over. And it's such a beautiful reference of like, when you are doing what you are supposed to be doing, it will all happen. It'll all fall into place, and there's nothing you can do to stop it. And so, if it feels true to your heart, then just know that you'll see it come through. So with that, I think keep teaching, keep staying true to the practice. That's something that's also important. So when you're taking that time out for yourself, you're making sure you're filling up your cup with those same ways that you expect to fill your clients' cups, and you expect them to fill their own cups, right? Be a model of the work that you are providing. Be an example of the work, and it will come through. It'll shine through. It'll be much more genuine. You'll be able to engage in much more conversations, and you'll be much more confident in the services that you're able to provide. I think I wanted to make a note about invoicing when you do have when you are building your client roster. Make sure that you're keeping track of invoices. A very simple and free app that I like to use is Street Invoice, and it keeps track of all of my invoices. It sends them an email right away. As soon as I receive payment, I can track it. It sends them a receipt once they've given me payment or whatever the case may be. Keep a track of all of that. It'll make all of your taxes at the end of the year much easier. And also establishing an account, a business account as well. That's something that I think people should make sure to do if they're really serious about the journey. Just have everything in place.
Yeah, absolutely. And this goes to not only working with private, just as a teacher in general,
Yeah.
like basics,
Mm-hmm.
like have it separate from
Yeah.
your personal account. Absolutely, 100%. So thank
Mm-hmm.
you. If people have questions, they can email you at that same email you gave us before. I'll make sure to.
Yes. Healing at therainbowwellness.org, or reach out to me via IG at mindful.intangents.
Perfect. Thank you so much again. And I just love spending part of my afternoon with you. I mean, what a blessing. So thank you.
Thank you. It's always a pleasure. It's always too much fun.
Right. I know we have a lot of fun together. That's great.